Welcome everyone to joining our today's webinar, Multi-Factor Storage in Ransomware Protection. So as you guys know, ransomware is one of the hottest topic in cybersecurity world. And because ransomware have continues to wake havoc globally, it does not discriminate against specific industry or a vertical. It's as long as everyone want to attack you guys, especially now is like remote working. But as we know, there's three most common attack factor, which is phishing, RDP compromise, and software vulnerability. And according to research in Q1 2021 itself, is more than half the ransomware attack used the RDP compromise factor. So while the EDR can guard against the infection through phishing factor, so is there any real strategy against the RDP? So today, as mentioned, we have very lucky to have two speakers, which is the Director Security Product Management from Lumen, Wai Kit, and also the CTO and co-founder of InsiderSecurity, KS. So without further ado, I pass it over to you, Wai Kit.
Yeah, sure. Actually, just to add on to what Kenneth mentioned, in the world of digital that we live in today, as long as you have an IP address, you are potentially a target, and it doesn't differentiate or discriminate against specific verticals or industries. And I think that's a reality that we're living in today. So quick intro about myself. I head the security practice here in Lumen for Asia Pac. We are basically a MSSP as well as a security service provider. KS?
Hello everyone, so my name is KS, so I'm the co-founder of InsiderSecurity. So we are a software company. We built the UEBA product, which looks for anomaly within the network. So before I co-founded the company, I used to spend more than 10 years doing security and vulnerability research.
Yep. And later on, we'll tell you why both of us are here. And it's a unique proposition that we want to perhaps share with the audience today to highlight how a combination of 1 + 1 is more than 2, right? And so a lot of times we look at the cyber risks that exist today. Ransomware always pops up as one of the key concerns and worries of many organizations. And I don't blame anyone for that. It's really a very nasty plague. It's possibly as worse as COVID-19 out there. But if you peel off the layers, what's driving ransomware? It's the financial, the monetizing of those attacks. And that's where it's driving the evolution of ransomware. So we heard about phishing and spam and endpoints being exposed to ransomware, but it's evolving into double taps and into a new form of targeted enterprise-specific attacks where adversaries will try to steal data before they detonate a ransomware, right? And that's where it's becoming something that is requires a new set of controls to look at detecting and responding to that kind of evolved ransomware attack. And so why don't we show you a case study of a typical queue chain involving this new form of vector. All right, so this queue chain is one of the possible vector for ransomware attack, where a compromised network access, whether it's through a stolen credential or an exposed RDP service out in the open, allows an intruder to gain an initial foothold into your network environment. And once they gain that initial foothold, through that means they will start to perform reconnaissance activities, try to understand what your environment looks at and start to carry out lateral movement.
That's correct. Also, Wai Kit, to add on to the initial foothold, in fact, it is getting harder and harder to close the initial foothold because we are seeing the gap between vulnerability being reported to full exploitation. The gap is getting narrower and narrow because there are a lot of investment done on security research. And in fact, one of the recent ransomware that we have seen, that the dark side ransomware, which is well known for attacking the Colonial Pipeline in USA in the mid of this year. So what happened is the VMware was reported. In fact, there were quite a number of vulnerability reported in VMware services, ESXIs, this year. And it's just within a week of reporting of the vulnerability, the attacker they managed to craft an exploit, and they managed to create a worm-like ransomware that looks for vulnerable VMware that is public facing. And this is actually their entry point to the organization.
Yep. And once the gain entry is pretty much an open door where they start to spawn the processes and create that connection back to their C2 and their servers and start to identify valuable data, because that's what they're after. That's exactly what they're after, to exfiltrate those data and hold you or extort you for ransom, for payments, right? And
right. Yeah.
They'll continue to.
So actually there is a silver lining. I mean, although what we have been sharing is dark and gloom, but actually there is a silver lining in all this Q chain, because traditionally, or at least the ransomware 2 years ago, do not perform so much activities before detonation. And what we're seeing now is the ransomware are actually generating a lot more signal than the past. So this actually serves as a warning, Wai Kit. We can actually use these signals to detect the ransomware before more damage can be done.
Yep. So it's making sense of the signal, something that will help to influence the outcome. So either you make sense of them, identify them as potential IOCs, or if not, they are basically blind spots. And if you look at the corresponding mapping of this Q chain to what traditional security monitoring does, a lot of times the signals are not fully identified and make use of. So for example, creating a backdoor beacon traffic. Sure, if you have a threat intel feed that maps those traffic against a malicious IP, we could potentially pick it up through a rule-based traditional SIEM log correlation service, right? And when they detonate a ransomware and to start encrypting your systems, sure, if you have an EDR agent running on those servers, you could detect that and stop it before it does any damages or impact to your systems. But actually, the damage is already done. The damage is done because data has been exfiltrated. So how do we minimize dwell time and minimize that impact by detecting and stopping those data exfiltration? Perhaps Kim Seong, you might want to share, but before, go ahead.
So again, there's a lot of signals that we can leverage on. So we'll be talking about how can we leverage on this signal to detect for the signs of ransomware that is lurking within the organization.
Yep. So, but before we go on, maybe let's do a poll to understand, do you consider this scenario something that could possibly happen to your environment, to your organization? How likely would that be? Let's take maybe 10, 15 seconds to do this, and then How's the response looking like?
65% now.
Okay.
It's gonna give a few more seconds. Okay, let's end the poll.
Let's have a look at
Yeah.
the result. Yep. So that's interesting because I see that at least more than half of the audience thinks that it's either likely or very likely that this scenario could happen to you. So if we know that these are blind spots, how do we actually put in the right or necessary controls to monitor and be able to detect that? Maybe King Seong, you want to share more about that?
Yep. Okay. So again, so I'm going to share about the silver lining, the good news. So signals are out there. We can actually monitor for the signals to detect for the presence of the triple extortion or double extortion ransomware. So for example, as Wai Kit has mentioned earlier, the entry point is really a few vector. They can use traditional phishing, or they can attack your public-facing RDP server, or they could leverage on exploit. For example, the VMware exploit that was widely used this year. Okay, so for lock-in system like RDP and VPN, what can we look for? Of course, the obvious signals are the field logins. So if we are interested in RDP, you should look at your Windows event logs, Windows security event logs. So the data you can look for field login, for example, which is pretty straightforward because with the field login, you can detect attempts. And besides field login, we should also look for successful login, because for a successful attempt, for an attacker who are already within a network, they might change in the RDP access behavior. For example, they hardly need to access a set of server and they start doing so within a short period of time. So these are actually some signs of anomalies that you can look for to detect actually for the unknown, for change in human behavior that might indicate that the account has been compromised by the ransomware. So in fact, this is leveraged by the Conti and DarkSide. So these two ransomware is notorious and well known to use the RDP as a vector.
Yeah. It's always best practice to not expose your RDP to public. Leverage on your VPN as much as possible. I understand many organizations have IT admins that's working from home or remotely, and it's a new norm. But you can't sacrifice safety for convenience. I think that's something that you have to balance, right?
Yep, that's correct. So for the next stage, once the attacker is inside the network, they will perform reconnaissance. In fact, this is something that is getting common in a modern ransomware. So we are seeing that a lot of modern ransomware, they start doing port scan or reconnaissance from within your network. So no more should we expect network scan to be from only towards your public facing server. But if you do see a network scan from within your network from another unknown host, or it could be from one of your endpoint against a server. So this actually clear signs that a ransomware or something might be lurking inside your network, unless you're expecting a vulnerability assessment exercise to be ongoing, of course. Otherwise, there should not be a good reason to detect a scan within your network. So how do we do that? Okay, if you have the net flow, you can actually ingest and perform analytics on net flow to detect for scans like this. So again, the Conti ransomware is well known to perform such active reconnaissance action within the organization.
Yep.
Okay.
And the last one?
Yeah. The last one is system service creation. Okay. So again, the top three well-known ransomware this year: DarkSide, Conti, and Ryuk. So if there is something really similar and common within all the modern triple extortion or double extortion ransomware is they are acting more and more like the advanced persistent threat actor, the APT actor. So they leverage they leverage the tool that is already existing in the system. So we call this living off the land. They would use PSExec. So PSExec is actually a tool from Microsoft. It allows the user to launch process remotely. So in fact, PSExec has been used by all the ransomware, all the well-known ransomware, to launch ransomware remotely on another server. So they use this tool to move laterally and to deploy. They pretty much is a deployment tool from Microsoft, so it will not be blocked by antivirus or even the EDR. So the thing about PSExec is every time it runs, it will create a new system services in the server. So again, due to the fact that the service will be created, you can actually detect for such activity in your event logs, Windows security event logs. The challenge in doing this is there might be, I mean, if your organization is already using such deployment tool on a daily basis, it might be hard to differentiate the signal from the legitimate service creation to the unknown unknown, such as the illegal service creation that is conducted by the actor.
Yep. So talking about unknown unknowns, actually, some of you might be thinking, hey, if the signals are from event logs and sys logs and netflow logs, and why can't we detect this from our SIEM, from log correlation, from rules and use cases that we define on our SIEM? Sure, you can, but this is just one part of it. And I think KS mentioned about the unknown unknowns. So what actually are unknown unknowns? And I think that's the part that makes it much more difficult to pick up using traditional rule-based use cases or correlation rules, right?
Yep. So Wai Kit, I'm going to give 2 more examples of the unknown unknown using the data transfer and network beacon detection use cases. So assuming that the attacker has a look around in the network and they have actually found valuable data, so they are definitely, I mean, before encrypting it, they are definitely going to exfiltrate the data. So that will serve as a the second level, or the double extortion. That is, if we refuse to pay, they will show that they have the data and they will leak it to the public. Okay, so before they do that, they need to leak the data. So again, attackers are no more leveraging on a bespoke tool that they wrote themselves that has high chances of getting detected by antivirus. So in fact, we have seen that they have used a public internet data backup services such as Dropbox or Archive. So in fact, these are the this tool that performs the upload. You can expect to see a Dropbox client as well. This is actually legitimate, and in fact, these are signed executable. So again, it won't be detected. That's because the file signature is good. So to really detect for the, so these are some of the unknown. So by leveraging on the NetFlow analytic, we will be able to know that, okay, there is a lot of network traffic suddenly going to Dropbox. Is this expected? Maybe your organization is already using Dropbox, for example. So by differentiating the signals from the legitimate process versus the unexpected process, we will be able to see such unknown activity. So that's when the attacker is doing the data transfer.
Yep, it's like if I'm the DBA and sysadmin and I have full privilege, and somebody has got hold of my credentials, then whatever activities that they carry out while they are on the system, it will seem to be legitimate, and it might appear to be me doing that. But how do we actually catch that kind of suspicious activities? Is basically through profiling, through baselining, through clustering. So things like, for example, if I work Monday 9 to 5, hypothetically, I don't, but if I work 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, but my credentials logs in on is found to log in successfully on a Sunday morning, which is very rare, at 2 a.m., say, for example, and that's going to be a red flag, right? A high risk activity, and that's something that warrants an investigation to determine, hey, what is this guy doing? What is Wai Kit doing that early on a Sunday morning? Or maybe coming from a different source IP, or maybe a rare activities. I've never used a certain applications like Dropbox, for example, before, and I start using it for the first time and started using it to transfer data for the first time. That kind of things give us the signals or indicators that, hey, something funny is happening, right, KS?
That's correct. So again, Wai Kit, so what you have mentioned is really hard to define as a rule in SIEM because we cannot simply define a organization-wide global rule that says that no one should log in after or on a Sunday, for example, because everyone will have a different. We are all really fluid, dynamic. So everyone will have a different work profile and preference. So it is really important to learn what is the profile of every individual, and to detect anomaly out of the norm, out of the learned profile. So, another example is the network beacon. So again, if we are ingesting the net flow, we can actually look for signals. So what is a beacon? You can imagine this is like a radio signal that keeps sending a ping signal to a remote destination. So network beacon is something that we can actually use, and this is what the attacker, regardless if they are APT or ransomware, they have been using this technique to establish command and communication with their host server somewhere on the internet. Traditionally, the malware in the past, they will open a network port, service port, but it will not work anymore because of the common firewall usage. So the ransomware and APT, what they do is they will send a signal, they will send a beacon signal to a external source, to the external destination on the internet to receive more commands. And then, of course, they will leverage this and perform more lateral movement within the network. So I think we've seen a lot of solution that rule-based solution or a lot of IOC that relies on a blacklist, for example, IP address, hostname, or even a DNS hostname. We have seen this IOC. These are commonly available. You can subscribe to this. So this is a good starting point, yes. But what if you are a target of a totally new ransomware campaign that is not yet reported? So what that means is that there will be no IOCs to leverage on. So instead of so to up our game, instead of on top of using just the IOC, we can look for anomaly signals such as this. We can actually leverage on the net flow and perform some analytic. With this, we can actually detect all possible network beacon, pretty much the signals that look like they are sending a periodic ping to external hosts. So again, this is one way we can look for the unknown. One way we can look for ransomware that may have not been reported or detected with no IOC available.
Yep. And I think the other point to note about is also account manipulation, right?
Correct.
Privileged accounts, especially, and that's
Correct.
very important. Certain industry, especially regulated ones, require us to actively monitor activities around privileged accounts.
Correct. So in fact, account manipulation is a really common modus operandi in almost all the triple ransomware. So again, what happened is if once the ransomware or the controller behind the ransomware have already gotten control of some privileged account, or maybe they have already taken over the domain controller, for example, what they will do is they will actually create a new account and upgrade the account to a administrator group. So this actually serves as a backup in case the ransomware was actually removed, or the backdoor were actually removed. They could still log in back into the server through RDP, through a legitimate account. And of course, this activity of creating an account and increasing the privilege of the account actually left trails in the Windows Defense Security log. So again, this is something that can be monitored, and there are log sources available.
Yep. So together with InsiderSecurity, Lumen actually brings this value proposition to the market by combining InsiderSecurity's technology and Lumen's security operations center and our expertise to provide a 24/7 end-to-end managed security service called Managed Security Behavior Analytics Service. So you don't need to own or procure or set up or deploy your own platform. This provided as an outsourced managed security service to you to augment what you probably already have in terms of rule-based log correlation, so that we minimize these blind spots, right? So let me recap what we have shared so far. I think when you look at the whole scheme of cyber risk, it's no longer a matter of if, it's a matter of when something might happen to you, your organization. A lot of us in most organizations, we run a very lean IT team. Some may not even have security expertise in-house. So how do you manage and correlate the different signals and to be able to detect security events and incidents before they do damage to your environment? How do you make sure that you have minimum blind spots in your environment? Make sure that you have sufficient adequate controls to be able to detect the unknown unknowns. And a lot of times this will seem like you have to find those needles in a huge, humongous pile of haystack. Because why? As the organization changes, getting transformed digitally, your workforce working remotely, all these dynamics plus the emergence of zero-day exploits, vulnerabilities that could be weaponized, creates dynamic variables that is getting harder and harder to detect. So having a 24/7 monitoring capability for suspicious user activities, as well as anomalous network traffic, to determine if there's been exfiltration attempts, is very important to augment and make sure that we minimize those blind spots. And lastly, having an effective plan in place so that you know how to maximize the value of behavior analytics to detect and remediate ransomware attacks in this specific vector is important in most organizations, right? And so I want to leave you with a few tips. Firstly, as I mentioned and KS mentioned earlier, it's very important. Do not expose clear text protocols, RDP, SSH out in the open. I think if you require remote admin access, do that through VPN. Okay. Secondly, patch, and patch. That's very important. And many organizations I know of today don't even carry out vulnerability assessment scans or pen testing. I think it's very important because there are vulnerabilities that are critical and there are zero-day exploits that will surface, as we have seen in the last 1 year or so. It's becoming really rampant. All right, so make sure that we patch, we update, we close those gaps so that there cannot be taken advantage of. And of course, it's also very important to make sure that you educate your employees, make sure that they are aware of the what are the dangers, what are the actions that they should not do, and back up your data. All right, so make sure that you have behavior analytics to augment your traditional rule-based monitoring. So with that, I would end here. And I think KS and myself will be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Hi. Hi, so now it's the Q&A times. Any of you have questions, feel free to share in the chat box or Q&A, and then KS and Wai Kit here will be answering. So for the questions from Sarasas, so if you would like to any material regarding this webinar, then please email our team, and then we will share the PPT with you guys. So, okay, I have one question from the audience. Okay, so Wai Kit, so are there any solution or product available to detect double or triple extortion ransomware?
Yep. So as we mentioned, there are signals that's abundant from whether it's logs or user or network activities, and hence the partnership or collaboration between Lumen and InsiderSecurity offers managed security behavior analytics. This is the service that encompasses the use of UEBA to profile, baseline, and detect unusual or suspicious user activities, especially pertaining to data exfiltration, to network recon, lateral movements, activities that leads towards the data theft, right? So we want to be able to help our clients to detect that and mitigate that before the damage takes place. KS, you want to add to that?
Yep. So Wai Kit, I agree with you. Due to the abundance of signal, detecting for these signals using a behavior analytic approach is the current good approach. So maybe if the question were to ask, maybe if I were to be asked the same question 2 or 3 years ago, I would suggest an antivirus or EDR solution. But again, due to the evolving nature, I agree with Wai Kit that we have to, we can use a signal, look for behavior changes, and this is a good approach going forward.
Yeah. So
thank you. Yeah,
I think Roger has a question.
Yes. Hi, Roger. Good to have you in our event again. So Roger asks, UBA makes a lot of sense. How is the adoption rate among large corporate, and how effective it is in real life?
Yep. So it's, first of all, I think I can't disclose the identity of our clients, but just to give you some examples, we are providing this service to several clients from different verticals. One is a real estate investment company. They own a suite of shopping malls, office buildings, not just across the region, but globally, right? And the other ones is a logistic company, and there are a few others, including FSI's insurance. So the adoption rate is pretty high, but the thing with UEBA solution is that if you go out and buy a tool and deploy it, run it, a lot of times making sense of the signals and indicators that comes out from it requires expertise and skills. And I think that's where the success rate is not that high, because most organizations, they treat tools in a way that if you turn it on, it's like water on tap, but unfortunately it's not. You need skills to be able to interpret the signals and indicators that comes out from it, and you need to be able to investigate those as well. So we're doing this as a service, not just the technology, but the people, the process, the skill sets to help them interpret, investigate, up to a point where we need the client's assistance. We will escalate that event or ticket to them and say, hey, we noticed this user, ABC, John Doe, whoever that may be, is doing this, and this has been a recurring pattern over the last 3 hours, which is unusual because never seen before in the last 6 months. And we provide layman's interpretation and findings, analysis of those indicators, and get them to take that last mile, validate, is that a legitimate activity, right? And it's been successful so far. Yeah.
KS, anything to add?
So yes, we have actually seen a wide adoption rate at least in the local Singapore government. Again, I cannot disclose the name of the client. So again, the motivation is because there is a greater need to monitor the internal systems for threats. So maybe some of you may be familiar with the recent SolarWinds attack. So this is something that has gone on even in the US defense system that was undetected for nearly a year. So in fact, with our system, we would have picked up a lot of these signals because soon after the attack, there were a lot of IOC published related to SolarWinds. So in fact, most of the IOC would have been picked up by our system, even without having any of the signatures. So, so in fact, and in some of the local company that we have supported, the behavior monitoring is already a norm, and in fact, it's expected to be implemented as part of the compliance.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, I have another question our audience have PM me. So he mentioned that he said, I have a SIM and actively monitoring my logs. Is there enough to perform the detection for double or triple extortion ransomware?
Yes, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. Right. Okay. So SIM is okay. That is really good. So if you have a SIM, so the next challenge is really to keep up with the maintaining of the rules and noise. So the moment when new rule is turned on, so what happens is you may be flooded by a lot of hits, a lot of activities, and the next challenge is really to make sense of the abundance of detection. How do you know which detection is false positive? How do you know the detection is actually the ransomware, pretty much the needle in the haystack? So on top of this SIM, you also need a process that makes sense of all the detection that may be in the magnitude of thousands per minute. So a SIM is a good start, but there has to be a continuous process of refining the rules, and there has to be a lot of process put in to analyze the detection, which may take up a lot of time. So this is what UEBA does, because UEBA is pretty much most of the UEBA works on top of a SIM. You have a data collector, you already have a lot of rules built in, and then it will perform analytics to distill the noise from the anomaly.
So the key thing is about learning, right? Because learning the behavior, what differentiating what's good from bad, right? So there's a saying that I always use. SIM is trying to detect evil, because you know what you're looking for. You build the rules, you build the use cases. But a UEBA is understanding what good looks like so that you can tell what's evil from good.
That's
right.
Correct.
So it's the unknown unknowns that worries us, because every day you get all these new exploits and new things that's coming out, and that's what catches us off guard.
Okay, thank you. So for another question is our audience said like he have the PAM implemented, which is like privilege access management. Would the ransomware operators still be able to look around even with the privilege account lockdown?
Okay, that's a good question. So I like to take this. Okay, so there are various PAM product out there. So the PAM product is really good at locking privileged account. For example, instead of so for context, with a PAM, before the PAM, to log into a server with a privileged account, you can do it arbitrarily. But with a PAM, you need to have another process, additional process to check out that account. Maybe you need to key in an OTP or something like that before you can log into a server with the privileged account. So it means that all the privileged account are locked ideally. However, in reality, especially in large organization where you have hundreds of privileged account or hundreds of server, it is really hard to lock down all the account. And on top of the interactive account, which is what your system administrator will be using most of the time, there are also system account. So in fact, imagine that you have been running an organization, you have been maintaining the IT system for more than 10 years, and the PAM was implemented this year. It will be really challenging to onboard all the privileged account. So this includes the interactive and system account into the PAM, because by typically the system account will take longer to integrate into PAM because if we break the system account, a lot of your services will be broken. So due to the virtue of this, the attacker, regardless if they are APT or ransomware, they will still be able to leverage or hijack the existing privileged account. So again, this could be your service account that is not already onboarded into the PAM. And again, the challenge with PAM is really onboarding all the system account into the system.
Wai Kit?
Yep. So it's always using the right tool or technology to address different needs and different problem statements. I think a PAM tool helps in the authentication, authorization level. But when you look at the counting and monitoring the bad behaviors or suspicious behaviors, you need a different thing. So different medication for different ailments.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from the audience? If not, I would like to thank everyone for attending our webinar today. And also I would like to thank Wai Kit and KS for the insightful sharing on the strategy, how to defend ransomware. Thanks again, guys. Hope to see you guys in our next event. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take your
Thank you,
time.
everyone.